always start with what you feel comfortable with. And there's another good life lesson, right?
Yeah.
Start with what you feel comfortable with, and focus on the good.
Hello, welcome back to the Marnie on the Move podcast. I'm your host, Marnie Salop. Today on the podcast, I am syncing up with Adina O'Neill. She is the author of the new book, Forward is a Pace. She is a swimming and triathlon coach and the founder of Team Be Real. Talk about Adina's journey into endurance sports, how she got into open water swimming and triathlon, her philosophy around coaching and training, and her new book, Forward is a Pace. You are going to love this conversation. Adina shares some tips and advice on open water swimming. We talk about some big lessons that she's learned along the way, building her business, writing her book, and training as an athlete. Shout out to our partners at SciFox Health. They offer the lowest price comprehensive at-home blood test with over 17 key biomarkers, some of my favorites being vitamin D, ApoB, homocysteine, and HbA1c for overall health. As a runner, cyclist, and triathlete, I'm looking to optimize my athletic performance and stay healthy through my training and racing as I gear up for the New York City Marathon and Ironman New York 70.3 this fall. I'll be monitoring my ferritin, iron, HSCRP to make sure I'm not overtraining and staying healthy as I build my endurance. It's great that SciFox Health is affordable because you can test more frequently, which is ideal. P.S. If you use my link, you get an additional 20% off your first test. That's SciFoxHealth.com/Marnie on the Move. That's SIPHOX.com/Marnie on the Move. So Adina, it is awesome to connect with you today on the Marnie on the Move podcast, and congrats on your new book, Forward is a Pace.
Thank you.
Super
I'm excited
cool
to be here. Yeah, this is it's kind of something I never really dreamed of doing, but it turned into a really good idea, and it was a lot of fun.
So take me back to the beginning. Like, where did athletics start for you? Where did it all begin?
It all began in a small town in northern Jersey called Vernon, in a little neighborhood called Cliffwood Lake, where there's a lake and not much else to do. And I learned how to swim when I was very young. I was on our neighborhood swim team at 5 years old, and I loved the water. I was just always in the water. I begged my parents to join a winter swim team. We hauled my two brothers along with us because there's nothing else to do and everything was far away from where we lived. And as time went on, they became excellent swimmers. I was never fast and just kind of, swam for fun and stuck with it just because that's what we all did. And in high school, I played field hockey. I was always very active, doing all kinds of things. And eventually, I stopped swimming in high school and went off on all kinds of other sports. And fast forward, until 2009, a friend of mine had signed up for a triathlon and was afraid to swim.
Okay.
It's an ocean swim here in Massachusetts, where I live now. And she was like, there's no way I'm swimming in the ocean. This had to be about a month before the race. And I was like, well, it doesn't sound so far. She's like, well, will you do it? So I broke all of the rules. I tried everything new on race day.
Oh my God.
Like, I had never worn a wetsuit. I had never actually swam in the ocean. I mean, I've been playing in the waves since I was a kid at the Jersey Shore, but never swam in the ocean. I had no clue what was going on. I called up my brother, who I have two brothers, one of whom is now, I think he's up to 11 or 12 full Ironman.
Oh my God.
And he's been in the sport. He's been in the sport for 30 years. And I said, what do I do? And he gave me some tips. He's like, you'll be fine. So I went and I swam. I had a blast. I was like, that is fun.
Oh my God.
I threw my kids into the sport, and a couple years later, they're like, well, you have to do this. And I said, I don't run and I have no desire to run. I was like, I'm sure I could fake, 10, 15 miles on a bike, but running. And at the end, I'm like, no way. And eventually a friend of mine corrupted me, as we like to say, into doing my first 5K. And after I had done a few 5Ks, my kids were like, well, you're running, so now you have to do a triathlon. And I really could not argue with their logic. So I bought a bike, started training, and I went back to the same place where I had done the relay and did the full triathlon. It was the day before my 41st birthday.
Okay.
And as they say, I caught the bug. It's just the atmosphere. I mean, you and I met at a swim event.
I know, and I was terrified and you were like trying to help me, but there's no helping me. I've given up.
But like those events are so much fun. The social nature, like at that point, like I said, I was 41 years old. I've got two school age. That's what they call it. School age children. And, it was like, it was nice to have something for me.
Yeah.
And you just met so many people and it was a whole new world. So, so I started doing triathlons. I was, worked my way up to longer running races and eventually did one marathon. That was enough.
Yeah.
And then worked my way up, did one Ironman. That was enough.
Yeah.
It's just, there's too much running involved in all of that.
I get that.
And then during the pandemic, the pools were closed. So I spent more time outside in the open water when I found all the marathon swimmers and the people who are swimming year round. And I was like, well, now this is something I can get into.
Right.
And of course there were no triathlons to worry about. So I didn't feel guilty about more swimming and less running or cycling. And I just kept swimming and swimming and swimming, and fell in love with the fact that I could do these longer swim races, and you didn't have to worry about being fast,
right?
Which played right into my strength. Like I have one pace, I literally can do it all day long.
That's great.
So, yeah. And that's, and that's what brought me down to the event in Connecticut at Quasi where we met. A friend of mine was like, oh, come down to the swim race. I was like, okay, let's go. And that was actually my first ever swim event.
Wow. And you did amazing. I mean, and that was 5 miles, right? Was it?
Yeah. So they had like the 3 mile, 1.5 and half mile.
You did all of them.
Yeah. And I had signed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I signed up for the 3 mile and my friend was doing the half mile. So I was like, well, I'm here anyway. Like, what am I going to do while I'm waiting around? Can I just upgrade? So it's like, more swimming. I'm not one to be super worried about my placement or my time.
Right.
I just want to swim.
Right.
So I was like, well, I've got the time. I was like, I should be able to, swim another couple of miles. And it was so much fun. I met a bunch of people and, did some swimming and, just for me, that's what it's all about.
It was a beautiful lake too.
It is a beautiful
Are you doing it? Are they still doing that? I feel like they do it every year.
They do it every year. Yep. And actually my friend who I went to meet, she goes down there every year. I went back the year after I met you, but I'm not one much to repeat events. Okay. And the only reason, and I went back the second year because I wanted to train to feel stronger to do all 5 miles.
Okay.
Whereas I wasn't prepared for 5 miles of swimming that day. So I was kind of, by the end, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. So I wanted to, kind of like a redemption thing. I really wanted to get back and feel stronger about the 5 miles. So I went back, but I'm not one to repeat races very often.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I like the newness.
Yeah, I think I go back and do the same things over and over again because it's mostly I think it's because of the swim, to be honest. Because once a swim works for me, then that's good, because it takes me. It's so challenging for me to mentally wrap my head around doing an open water swim that once one is good, I'll go back. And actually, it's funny because during the pandemic. Right after the pandemic, I did Muscle Man, and that was my first race back. And the swim was so awful that I went back 2 more times and did it as a relay because the bike course is amazing. It is, and the run is a little bit of a sufferfest it's, because it gets hot and there are some hills, not a lot of hills, but the hills are like no joke. So I, yeah, it's a great course. And if you are confident in the water, you'll be fine. Because it's basically like 500 meters of like flat swimming. And then you get out to a point where you're mentally in a place where you're like, I'm not turning around, but I want to. And you can persevere in the chop because even though it's a lake, which I learned, there can be chop. And
Lakes and choppy.
yeah, so it's a great race. But yeah, I mean, so I tend to do a lot of things over again. But this summer, I'm like, not. I'm just out. Another thing, it's swimming is tough though. So, and you're also a coach. So when did you start coaching?
Yes.
Because I feel like you also started doing that right after we met as well.
Yeah. So 2019 is when I started coaching triathletes.
Okay.
And then I just, about 2 years ago, I started coaching swimmers.
Oh, okay.
So I've got my USA Tri license. I also have my US Masters and World Open Water Swimming, WOWSA, which is always fun to say.
Yeah, that is fun.
I'm certified to do all three. This year actually I'm training. I'm working with my first marathon swimmers. So
That's cool.
So that's exciting to help somebody else get to that marathon swim distance.
Now, is a marathon swim, and this may sound like a dumb question, but it's not 26.2 miles.
It is not.
How many miles are in a marathon swim? Or meters?
So anything 10K or above is considered a marathon. So when you watch the Olympics, they do a 10K swim, and that's the marathon swim. And of course, for me, the big joke was, like runners like that kind of average person benchmark for a run is to break that 4-hour marathon. Mm-hmm. So the first time I did a 10K swim, I was at like 3:52, and I was like, only way I'm breaking 4 hours for a marathon is in the water.
That's amazing. I love that. That's so funny.
Yeah, so it's more like the time frame of it. Like it takes about the same amount of time to do a 10K swim as a marathon, as a full marathon. But and then of course you can do much longer distances, and then they call those ultra marathons, the same way as in running as you get above that marathon.
Got it. Okay, so it's not the same distance, because I mean, obviously a nautical mile is not the same thing as a mile, which I'm constantly trying to explain to people, like when I do 1800 in the pool, that it's a mile. And they're like, no, isn't a mile 1,600? And I'm like, on the track. Yes.
Yeah. Technically, it's 1,760 yards.
Okay. Oh my God.
A mile. I actually don't know how long a nautical mile is. I think it's longer than that.
Oh, really?
But then, in the pool, it's 1,600 meters. The swim mile, like when they swim the mile, you watch Katie Ledecky in the Olympics, it's a 1,650 in the pool. That's not an actual mile. They just call it the mile. It's close to a mile, but it's not.
Oh wow.
It's not a
okay,
mile,
it's very confusing.
Close enough.
Yeah, no, it's close enough. It's in the ballpark. It's fine.
In the ballpark,
I love
exactly.
It. So what do you started coaching in 2019, and are you still doing all the triathlons? Like, what's your personal, like, what have you been doing? What races? Like, what marathon swims have you done, and what's on your bucket list moving forward?
So I have done a lot more swimming than triathlons. I actually completed my first in-person triathlon since I did the Ironman in 2018. Okay. I did my first in-person triathlon a month ago because I kept having injuries, or I was prioritizing swimming, or the bike was canceled, or the run was canceled, or there's all kinds of weird things happening.
Always something.
But I like to do a sprint triathlon here or there just to still do it. I like the feeling of it. I like the idea of it. But my heart is definitely in swimming. It's a lot easier on your body, especially in the summertime. Like, I'm in Massachusetts. It's hot. I don't want to go outside and run. And with the marathon swimming, it takes so much time to do swim training that I don't have as much time for cycling and running. And I really just am much enjoying the swimming right now. So, so we were just down in Rock Hall, Maryland. That was a great event that Kinetic Multisports put on. I love a local race.
Okay.
Being a small business owner, I like to support the small businesses. And then for marathon swims, so I've done a bunch of just things that are not races. There's Nantasket Beach, which is right here in Hull, Massachusetts. The length of the beach is 3 miles. So we like to say we'll go out, we'll do one lap, and that's a marathon swim, great. Right? So you've got like a 10K swim, and it's tough because it's one way down, and invariably on the way back, the current shifts, and you're swimming into something.
Okay.
So the return trip always seems harder than the way out. And it's just, and you never know what to expect. It can be cold, it can be, wavy, it can change on the moment's notice because you have, the weather to deal with, like any sport, any outdoor sport. But I've also done a couple of swims with the Kingdom Swims out of Vermont. Mm-hmm. They have called the Kingdom Games. Is where I did a 10-miler last year. I had signed up for 25K, and I ran out of time because it was very windy. Yeah. So it turned into a 13-miler, which was still pretty cool.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I mean, for my listeners who are just listening to this, I mean, it's not 13 miles. It's 13 miles, but it's not like going out for a half marathon or a 13-mile bike ride. Like swimming is a full body, intensive sport that requires a ton of mental, like fortitude and skill that it's like exponentially, in my opinion, more challenging than any other sport.
I think one of the hardest things about swimming a marathon or any distance swimming versus cycling or running, I mean, they all have their uniqueness about them that makes it hard, and they're all to be commended. But I think there's two things about swimming specifically that makes it very different. Number one is you can't just breathe at will. Right. Like you're in the water, right? So you can't just breathe at will. And the other thing is you're really kind of closed off from everything. Like you're face down in the water. My 13-mile swim, that was a 10-hour swim for me, right? So you're 10 hours in the water, kind of like just blocked out of life, which is one of the reasons I love marathon swimming. Is like you've got the waters kind of muffling your ears, your face is down, so you get the scenery, but it just blocks out all the noise. Right. And for some people, that's very problematic. For me, I find it very therapeutic. And that's one of the things that keeps bringing me back to it. But it's very unique to swimming.
So how do you, just talking about swimming, and as someone who's an anxious swimmer, how do you build that mindset and confidence to feel so relaxed and confident in the water that you can accomplish something no matter what the conditions are?
As with anything, a lot of practice. Okay. Putting yourself in the conditions that, you can't be a fair weather swimmer. Just like cyclists, like, I don't like to ride when it rains. Okay. Well, if you show up to a race and it rains and you've never practiced riding in the rain, you're going to have more anxiety about it. And nobody really I shouldn't say nobody. Yeah. Fewer people enjoy to ride in the rain because it adds a little bit of danger, uncertainty, unsafety. But if you practice riding in the rain, then when you show up to the race, if it rains, you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Right. You have that experience built up. So getting out and swimming in all different kinds of conditions.
So putting yourself in the situation.
Put yourself in the situation, and little by little, right? You don't just the same way you you don't walk out tomorrow and run a marathon. Right. You start with maybe, half a mile, like it depends on where you are, or a mile or a 5K, and you work up those little steps. And it's the same thing, you start with, let's swim when it's, overcast instead of sunny. Or let's swim when it's a little drizzly. Let's swim with that. There's waves. Let's go play in the waves and then we'll try to swim a little bit. So it's really that kind of like taking those small steps to build a little bit of confidence at the time, and look for something that you enjoy. And personally, I love the waves.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of when I was a little kid and we were on vacation at the shore playing in the waves. So when I see the waves, my brain thinks about how happy I was playing in the waves as a little kid, as opposed to, oh my gosh, it's hard to swim through those waves.
Well, why is it hard to swim through the waves? Like, what makes it easy for you and hard for someone else? And do you have some techniques that you could share? Obviously, someone can hire you as a coach to train, which I'm going through my mind right now. But, like, what are some tips that you can share for wave swimming for triathletes and anyone who wants to get out there?
Well, first of all, it's not easy for me.
Okay.
I just enjoy it.
Okay.
Like, right? So in my mind, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I like the waves. I didn't say it's easy.
Okay. Like, I like hills. Right? I love hills on the bike. Okay. Got it.
Same thing, easy. Right? Like, and it's not easy, but the sense of accomplishment, and that's a great parallel. The sense of accomplishment when you get to the top of a hill on the bike or on your run is the same as your sense of accomplishment of getting through the waves.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to swim into a wave. So if the wave is kind of coming at you, it's easier to swim into the wave,
center.
As opposed to swimming sideways with the wave.
Okay.
Sometimes you don't have a choice. Right. But ideally, you want to swim out beyond the waves, where the waves are breaking. So you might hear people talk, I swam beyond the break. So wherever the waves are breaking, that's the hardest spot to swim because the waves are breaking on you.
Right.
So the best thing you can do is swim directly into the wave, duck under them, and get out beyond where it's breaking. And hopefully that's where the smooth water is.
Right. But it's not necessarily smooth because it could be rolling. You could be
It still could be rolly and a little bumpy sometimes. We
bump
like
and
to call
jump
that.
and windsurfing, we call it. Yeah.
Yep. But the idea that the absolute best thing you can do in wavy water is focus on your body position.
Okay.
And that's probably the best thing you can do anywhere for swimming. Your body position is the foundation of your swim. And whether you're going against the wave or with the wave, your body position is going to help you be stronger and in control. So body position's a big one. And the other thing you can think about, a lot of times in the pool, when you work with swim coaches, they're always telling you to get a nice long and smooth stroke.
Right.
Well, when you're in the waves, you're going to shorten your stroke a little because the wave is bumping you around a little bit more. If you shorten that stroke up a little, it helps give you a little bit better control against the waves.
Interesting. It's funny because I was in the pool the other day and I was swimming with a bunch of people. We were circle swimming, and this one guy, I was swimming with people who are faster than me, and I always kind of preface getting in with them and say, like, I'm working on my speed. So swimming with you causes me like a positive stress. And so swim past me. I won't interrupt your swim. Like, I'm a very good pool swimmer. And they were like, well, of course they were like, we'll give you some tips and like blah, blah, blah. And they were so nice. And this one guy was like, lengthen your stroke. And, and I'm like, no, I'm a triathlete. I'm like, I'm practicing short strokes and power. And he just started laughing. I'm like, don't worry, I will be fine in this lane. But I did try what he said. And I think when I first started swimming, that was how I swam. And it is very relaxing, but it's not for open water.
I respectfully disagree.
Okay.
You definitely can swim with a nice long stroke in open water, but not
I know
when it's
about
super
swimming,
choppy.
So that's what I just thought.
Not when it's super choppy. It's like swimming is the funniest juxtaposition of whenever I work with swimmers. I was like, all right, in one breath, I'm like, oh, you got to be smooth and relaxed. And the next breath, I'm like, oh, you got to keep everything tight. They're like, well, which one is it? And it's a little bit of both. Okay. You have that kind of tightness throughout your body, but you want to be smooth and relaxed in your stroke, because if you're tight, like up here and like this kind of like
stressed,
nervous tightness, then you're not going to get. You want to get if it's not choppy, you want to get the most out of your glide you can.
Okay.
be efficient and save your energy so that way, you can get, you've got more energy for the bike and run.
Yeah. And now, I saw you in New York in Jones Beach, right? You were doing the relay? Because
Yes.
I remember I was making a video by the water,
Yes.
and I saw you and I was like, oh
Yep.
my God. So are you gonna do that again?
No, I was there because I thought it was really nice of Ironman to put a new race on my birthday with an ocean swim. So, because a lot of the new 70.3s seem to have downriver swims.
Yes, Maine.
Which,
yeah.
For swimmers, I'm like, the swim is already too short for me.
Okay.
I don't want it to be any shorter.
Okay.
So when I saw the ocean swim, and Jones Beach is not too far from Boston, and it was on my birthday, I grabbed a bunch of my teammates, people who have never either haven't done a 70.3 and were like thinking about it, and we did a couple of relays.
Cool.
To give some people the experience and exposure of being A, in a relay, B, at a big event like Ironman, just to see what it's like without having the pressure of doing all that training on your own.
And that was a really fun day. Speaking of choppy water,
yeah.
So how was the swim?
Yeah, no.
Just curious, because I did it as a relay.
Yeah, I did the relay too.
I didn't do the swim though, because that's my favorite thing.
Oh, you didn't do the swim? Oh, right.
Tim,
that's right.
Tim O'Donnell has the best thing he said about me, which is that I love to outsource the swim. And I think that, I don't do a relay, because I do the bike and the run. I just outsource the swim. Because I love the Ironman culture. But yeah, so how was the swim?
The swim practice the night before was rougher and more difficult than the swim the day of the race.
Yeah.
And my guess is, unfortunately, I did hear some people did the practice swim and then decided not to swim or not to race. And it's unfortunate because more likely than not, and the water is more choppy in the evening than it is in the morning. Not always, and that was the case this time. But I think that, and I was a little disappointed that they shortened the swim from a swimmer's standpoint. Right. But I was very grateful for my cyclists that they had shortened the swim, because the weather just got worse as the day went on. And so I'm guessing that they looked at the bigger picture. That's why they're a race director and I'm just, a swimmer.
They really do look at the bigger picture. Like even this weekend in Pennsylvania, when I was race announcing, they made the swim earlier because there were storms on the horizon, and they knew they wanted it to get people off the race course. Right. Yeah, they did a lot behind the scenes.
Yeah. So at first I was disappointed, and then later on I was just like, oh, this makes so much sense, because it just got worse as the day went on, and that was really rough conditions for those cyclists.
What about the runners? I was running, and I was dying. But I signed up again, just so you know. That was the hardest thing I think I've ever done. I don't think I've ever done any kind of anything, but I think the reason I felt confident was I have a lot of experience windsurfing, and I understand the wind, and it doesn't scare me on the ground. Yeah. And if I had a boat, I would be fine. But swimming, it was a little nerve-wracking. So I'm glad I had done it as a relay, but it was really rough. We were running on the beach and on the ocean side of the beach, and the wind was coming off the ocean. It was blowing into the shore. So it was a side wind. It was a side wind, a forward wind. It was next level.
It was. We respected it. We were all taking turns going back to cars and driving.
Yeah.
I was nice and
you were sitting in the car
dry because I had my dry robe on. I liked my swim parka. Yeah. So I was dry, but it was a rough day. I was really impressed with the spectators who stuck around, because that was a tough day.
It was harder for the spectators for sure, and all the volunteers. I was thinking about that, and my relay partner was in the car, and then she came out when I came through the finish line. But I was let's get out of here. It was really. But I signed up again.
Are you doing the whole thing this time, or are you farming out
the swim? I'm doing it with the same partner. She's like you. She is a very confident swimmer. She loves swimming. She was bummed out that the swim was shortened. She could have totally thrived in that kind of chaotic swim environment. And and we had a good time. Like, it was a fun race. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If it's nice out,
It's a beautiful
gorgeous.
course.
Yeah. So what do you have on deck then for the summer, since you're, yeah.
So I am doing a swim called the Nubble Light Swim in Maine. It goes out to the Nubble Lighthouse. It's a 2.4 mile swim, and I heard a ton of wonderful things about this swim. And apparently, this is the last year they're doing it, so I signed up for it because I don't like to miss out on things.
Yeah.
And then I'm headed out to Swim to the Moon, which is a swim festival that happens out in Michigan, and it happens to be. They had a virtual version for my very first 10K. I wanted to have a medal for it. So I signed up for their virtual version and have heard so many wonderful things about it since. I was like, well, one day I'll have to go. And this year they're having their 15th anniversary. So they're offering a 15K and calling it the Once in a Blue Moon.
Oh my God, that's so fun.
I was like, exactly. I am a total sucker for a good slogan or anything cute like that. So I actually signed up to do the 10K on Saturday and the 15K on Sunday.
That's exciting.
Yeah. So
is that around your birthday or when is it?
It's August.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, August. It's the end of August. Yeah. So not a birthday swim, but there's 4 or 5 women from my team who are going to the swim. One's doing her first 5K, one's doing her first 10K. And so we're doing that. And we'll see. I haven't seen all the details about cutoffs for the 15K. I'm actually not a very fast swimmer as far as relatives to swimmers go. So I need to pay close attention to cutoffs. I may not be able to make the cutoffs for the 15K, but so it might be a 10, it might be a 5. We'll see. But it'll be swimming and it'll be fun.
I think when I started the sport, I was really into getting on the podium and like all of those things. And as I got older, and I slowed down a little bit, I realized I could train to be fast. I mean, that is totally an option. But I prefer to have fun and chill out and just beat my own times and not be the fastest. It's much more enjoyable. And I realized, I don't know if it was in the last 3 years, maybe when I turned 50 in the last 2 years, that I don't have to do things that I don't want to do anymore. And it doesn't matter. There's no, I'm going to an Ironman event to do it at my own pace and have fun. So if I'm going to be back of the pack, who cares? Nobody cares.
All the fun is.
It's so much fun, and you meet so many cool people.
All the fun is.
I mean, so I get where you're saying it's just do it. Who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, you want to make the cutoff times, but at the same time,
Yeah. And that's what my Team Be Real is all about. It's just there are so many people who think that they don't belong or should not go and do any of these races because they're not fast enough or young enough or fit enough or tall enough or short enough. You are enough. And we're just all about, wherever you are, you're perfect where you are. And if a particular race has cutoffs that don't fit with your abilities, then you go find one that does.
Right. And that's a lot about your book too, right? Your new book, Forward is a Pace. Talk to me about the book, where the idea came from, and how it's doing, and dial me into the book.
All right. So ironically the same woman who corrupted me to do my first 5K has a publishing company, and she's like, you should write a book. So there's a little bit of. And I never really thought about it. But a lot of people had said to me, you should write a book. And I actually enjoy, I like to write stuff for Facebook and Instagram. I mean, I enjoy that. A lot of small business owners are like, oh, this is the worst. I hate doing that. But I'm not an amazing writer, but I'm not an awful writer. And I enjoy it. And I enjoy telling my story. And I notice that every time I tell a story, someone will say, oh, wow, that's a good point. Or, yeah, I felt that way. And there are these connections that happen so organically that I really, really make me happy to connect with other people. But also then when people are saying well, if you can do that, that inspired me to try.
Yeah.
And, I kind of tease, I've always been loud and I talk a lot. And so now it's for a good cause.
Right. You're using your platform.
And Yeah, yeah. But the book itself really is a tribute to all of the just, I call them ordinary
Yeah,
athletes, and or ordinary people who are extraordinary
yeah,
athletes.
I
That's
love
the Be
that.
Real
Yeah,
tagline. And it just, not everybody feels like they are going to fit in. Not everybody thinks they belong on a
right.
team, which is I very specifically called my team Be Real as opposed to a club, because all those people like, I couldn't make a team, I
Right.
wasn't fast enough, or I didn't look like an athlete. And, we spend so much time trying to fit in places
Mm,
where really we just stand out for who we are.
yeah,
And that was the message that I really wanted to give in the book, is that whoever you are, whatever you are striving for is perfect and worthwhile. And you go at your own pace, right? As long as you're moving forward, whatever that is, you keep moving forward. And maybe your pace is going for a podium. Maybe your pace is trying to finish a sprint. Maybe your pace is, doing a 200-mile trail run. Like, they're all good and they're all valid.
yeah,
And whatever accomplishment you make is worth celebrating. And I just really wanted to make sure that everybody knows that they
yeah.
belong somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important and wonderful message, and I love that about your everything that you do. Like, I've been following you on Instagram since we met, and I think, I think I hear a lot of people say, like, I'm not an athlete, or I could never do that, and part of me is like you can do
You
things.
can.
You put your mind to it and you do it. And no, and one of the biggest like lessons I've learned as an entrepreneur, never mind being in sports and athleticism, is like nobody cares except you. Like you're the only one.
Very true.
You're the
Yeah.
only one
Yeah.
that cares so much. And you think that other
For
people are looking at you and judging you, but everyone's doing
sure.
their own thing, right? I mean, do you feel
They're
like that?
worried about what you're thinking about them.
And is that something like with you? You have so many athletes that you work with. Like, is that something that comes up that you're constantly coaching about?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. All the time. So what we do, so I work with private one-on-one
Mm-hmm.
coaching athletes, and then I also have the team, which is a community, and it's group coaching. So once a week I do a live training that generally responds to some questions that athletes are asking within our private group. So if someone asks a question, I was like, oh, everyone's going to benefit from the answer.
Right.
And it's better than just giving like a 2-sentence answer.
Right.
It's supposed to be 2 minutes, but it's usually like 5 because I talk a
Yeah.
lot. But I also like to really educate the athletes so they understand, right? There are coaches out there just do what I tell you, just do what I say. But I think that we benefit from really understanding what's going on.
Yeah.
And sometimes I end up losing athletes because I teach them too well. And they're like, all right, I got it. I'm good. I don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
And it's disappointing for me because I'd love to keep working with them. But it's also
It's like a
a
testament.
huge compliment
Yeah.
that they've learned enough to be able to move on and do it on their own.
And they might come back for something
um,
else, right? Like you never know.
yeah, I absolutely. Like, I worked with a guy a couple of years ago. He did his first 70.3. He's like, yeah, thanks. And he went off to do a couple more 70.3s. And this year he's like, all right, I'm doing my first Ironman. Can you help me?
Yeah.
And so he came back and we're working together again. And it's great.
Yeah.
So, and probably after that, if he goes on to another Ironman, I could see him doing it on his own because
He's
gathering the knowledge
Yeah.
he needs. And that's great. Like, I was the same way. I had
Right.
a coach for on and off for short periods of time.
It's good to find someone that you can just be like that with, right? That knows you. So
Yeah.
and I think that's like
Yeah.
the longevity of a coaching business, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's the other great thing about the group coaching. I've got a lot of athletes who can, they're motivated enough to follow a training plan, but they just want some camaraderie and community, right? And maybe access to a coach to ask a question every now and then.
Yeah.
Someone pops in like, hey, I need some advice on sports bras, or I need advice on sneakers, and then you have a whole community of like-minded athletes to have a discussion with.
Yeah.
And just sometimes, get validated for like, oh my gosh, so I'm so scared to do this, or what should I do about that? Whatever topic, a million things happen that you try to figure out through the course of all endurance sports. And it's nice to have a group to have that conversation with.
Yeah. And so speaking of business and building a team and a club and writing your book, how has that been for you during this process? I don't know what you were doing before you launched your coaching and Tri Club and then got into writing a book. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about business and entrepreneurship and how did that all start for you? And what were you doing before?
So I started, when I graduated college, I had a degree in accounting.
Okay.
So I have a business background, and I worked in a big accounting firm for about 10 years, traveled to Paris. That's where I met my husband, who's from Massachusetts. So we came back here. And when we moved back and started having a family, I was laid off from the job I was working at. I went back to school and got a master's in education. And I actually taught second grade for 10 years in a French immersion program that we have here in our town. So I was able to mix French back into my life. I didn't want to lose that. And then when I left teaching right as I was starting my coaching business. And it's amazing how the experience teaching second grade for 10 years is so useful for coaching.
I was just thinking that, I'm the second grader that you're teaching to swim.
And especially, I specialize with newer athletes, right? So, and newer in the sense that either they've never done any triathlons before, or like that guy Dan I just mentioned, his first 70.3, his first Ironman. So I love, and as I mentioned earlier, I love that first time feeling. I don't go back to a lot of races and stuff. So, but I definitely have a knack of breaking things down. And I always tell people, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. Right. And I'm good at that. I've had 10 years of practice of really breaking it down. And that's a great thing. Depending on where you are in your journey as an athlete, you might need a coach who can break it down, or you might need the coach who is really hyper focused on, data and all, the latest technologies. Like, that's not me.
Yeah.
And, so it's great that there's so many different coaches, so you can find one that really fits and aligns with what your goals are.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, I agree. And I think, that's a great thing about coaches. And I have had so many coaches, and I think the best coaches for me as an athlete, and I'm also a coach, but I don't coach anyone. Like, I was just coaching myself. I coached a few people for the marathon, but I have other priorities and focuses. And I think, I was just self-coaching for a while, which has not really worked out for me. So, but that's a whole other podcast. But I think,
for sure.
I think it's great to understand what motivates you as an athlete and what you need from a coach, because that relationship, like any kind of business, there's millions of people that do the same thing, and it's really the connection and the relationship that make it work. So, and people need different things at different times, but I always love the coaches that get into the details of why. I'm like a why. I'm like the 5-year-old. Like, why am I doing this? Why do I need to do this? Can you explain it to me so then I can do it and not do it because I want to do something else? Or, and then I also am a deep dive data person. I love data, and I love understanding my heart rate versus my speed and little tweaks, all the things. Yeah. But I don't listen to myself. So I don't know if you coach yourself, but
it's hard to coach yourself.
Yeah.
I have not. I do coach myself, mostly because I haven't yet found, and maybe because I haven't looked very hard, because if I looked, I'd probably find someone, but I haven't found the coach that fits my goals and the way I look at things. And I'm also not super motivated to accomplish anything that I can't figure out on my
Right.
own at the moment. Yeah, I've got 2 kids in college. They're kind of still a priority.
Yeah.
And the big things that I want to do, which actually I don't think I answered that before, like the big thing that's on my list is like, I kind of want to cross Tahoe. I want to swim
one of
Lake
the
Tahoe.
what are they called again? There's 3 swims, right?
There's 3 swims. Yeah. I want to do the length, which is the long one. But that's like a huge investment, not
Money,
only in
yeah.
your time and training, but it's expensive
Yeah.
when you do a solo. People are like, oh, swimming, it's a bathing suit and a pair of goggles. Marathon swimming is
You
very
need to hire a
expensive.
boat
Like,
to go with
have
you.
to
You need
hire a
people. Yeah.
boat. Yeah, yeah.
You need
So,
sponsors. You need sponsors. You need all
yeah,
those
yeah.
things.
Yeah, it's a lot, I'm like, I have a friend who just went across the English Channel. I'm like, it's like $20,000 to
How much
if you
is
want to cross the
Tahoe?
English Channel. I haven't looked into it yet. I'm afraid to look.
It's a part of the Triple Crown, right? It's
Tahoe is part of the Triple Crown of lake swims.
Okay.
So they have the Triple Crown of open water swims is um, the English Channel, the Catalina Channel, and Manhattan.
Okay.
They call it the 20 bridges.
Yeah.
So that's the Triple Crown.
Okay.
And I'm sorry,
You're not swimming here?
you cannot pay me enough money to swim in the Hudson River around Manhattan. I'm sure it's beautiful. I'm not
No
doing
way.
it. Like,
No.
no, like, kudos to everybody who does. Huge respect. It's just personal preference. I am not swimming around Manhattan in the Hudson River. I don't even know that English Channel is not even on my radar.
Really? Okay.
I have not spoken to anyone who doesn't get stung by jellyfish, and I'm not interested in being stung by jellyfish. Like, I like to swim.
Yeah.
And and that's why Tahoe is kind of what
What
I
is
look
Tahoe
at.
like?
Right,
I mean, are there any
it's a lake.
animals in there? Like any sea life?
Elevation is the trick for Tahoe.
Okay.
For Tahoe.
Okay.
Because you're swimming at elevation, so that's kind of that.
You have to practice
that.
that.
Yeah.
You go to swim high, race low, but you're racing high, so you've gotta train higher.
Yeah. So so then there's that. We got to get out there like 10 days before and acclimate to.
Yeah, you probably need to do a practice like somehow, like even a year before, right? Like somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it gets expensive, right? If I lived near Tahoe, it wouldn't be as expensive because I just go down. That'd be good.
But you've been doing a lot.
That's also part of the thing.
Yeah, it's part of the training.
But it'll take some planning, and it's. That one is on my radar as something that I think I'd like to do. I may change my mind. I don't know. But that's what's on my mind right now.
And what lessons do you take from all of your swimming and triathlon that you bring to like everyday life and business?
All of them. Literally, I think we were chatting about this before we press record, is that literally everything you learn through endurance sports is a lesson for life. I definitely think the most important one I learned when I was training for Ironman. My son's pediatrician, who's an Ironman athlete, Dr. Fayemi, awesome guy. He's like, look, you're going to get out there and something is not going to go your way. And your job is to find a solution and move on. And that's like the number one piece of advice I give to everybody. That's my standard response. You're like, oh, what's the best piece of advice you can give to anyone? That's it.
Yeah.
And it's so applicable to everything. I mean, entrepreneurship is a moving target. And, it's like, I know you do a lot of different things in your business. And you're just like, well, I might try this. I might do this. Something is not going to go the way you planned it. Find a solution, move on. Yeah. And the same thing for real life. Like everything is about finding a solution, move on. You can't predict the future.
Yeah.
So that's the best one that I can think of. And the other one is, I don't know if it's a little bit chicken or egg. I don't know which one came first, but just, you're exactly where you need to be. Whether it is in sport or entrepreneurship or life in general, it's just like, you're right here. I have a bracelet that I wear often that says right here, right now, right? Because That's the only thing you can really control is what's happening right here, and you're where you need to be. Like, make the decision that feels right and do that, and that's the best decision. And you're gonna get to wherever you're gonna go, and it's not too fast, it's not too slow. You just keep going forward, because I heard that's a pace.
Yeah.
And but you just, there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
And like you said before, you're sitting there worried about all these things, like, oh my gosh, but you're the only one worrying about them.
That's one of my big things. Like, that's one of my big lessons, that from all of these things that we all do, entrepreneurship, life, it's like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. You are the only one that cares. But I think, like, the other thing is, like, I think it's amazing, honestly, like, all that you're doing. And I love that advice that you gave, because it wasn't something that I was thinking about, right? Like, the way you just said that was great. What's happening in the future of Team Be Real, Adina O'Neill, and Forward as a Pace? Like, where can we,
So the best way to keep track of me is the website teambereal.com.
Okay.
So it's team, the letter B, the word real, all together.com. You can find all our socials there. I like to hang out on Instagram and Facebook. I know people poo-poo Facebook, but I still love Facebook. Haven't quite figured out Threads yet.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
It's a lot of
I'm trying.
It's like, I feel like it's like Twitter light. People are a little bit mean on there. On Threads.
I never
Sarcastic.
I never had a Twitter account, so I don't know, but it's weird. It's not, but whenever something's new, it's weird.
Yeah.
So, I kind of hang out there now
Check
and
it out.
then,
Yeah.
and join in conversations or don't. But yeah, I haven't figured that vibe out. I love Facebook. I love Instagram. And so I hang out there a lot. The book, we're actually working on a couple of local book signings.
Oh, cool.
I always travel with a Sharpie. So if you have your book, I would love to sign it. And
people can buy it on Amazon and on your all the places.
Yep, you can buy it on Amazon, or go to forwardasapacebook.com.
Yep.
It'll take you right there, and so you don't have to think. I actually I have a couple of other ideas. There might be another book coming out. We're a new project to start now that we've opened that door.
Yeah.
And then the team is. We always have a monthly membership open. So if it's something that people are like, I don't know if I'd like to do that or not, join on for a month and hang out with us and meet some of the team. You can there's a bunch of bios of the teammates on the website as well. And hang out with us for a month. And we celebrate our Team Be Real anniversary in February. And I always offer a special annual membership at a big discount, so that way if anyone wants to be part of the team for the whole year, then look for that in February.
And do you ever do it in person? Like, where are a lot of your athletes? Are they near you? Are they here in New York? Like, where? Yeah.
So there's a big nucleus here in the Boston area.
Okay.
I do a lot of obviously all the in-person stuff.
Yeah.
I do a lot of like in-person swim stuff here in this area. But otherwise, my one-on-one athletes are
all over,
spread out, and the team is spread out. That's the beauty of modern technology is, we're connected. And then once a year, we have a retreat. So like last year, we went to Jones Beach. This year we went down to Maryland. I'm hoping to go West Coast.
Okay.
We've got a couple of West Coasters. I feel like I got to show the West Coasters some love.
Yeah, so people can find you online, and they can connect with you in person in Boston area. All those things.
Send me an email, hello@adinao'neill.com.
Okay.
2 L's like the surfing
surf company.
Yep, I married into a name that's water-like, so that's kind of cool.
That is cool. That's awesome. Well, Adina, this has been so great. I hope to bump into you again. I probably should make a point to swim with you so I could get over this crap. But yeah, I mean, I think the pressure has been taken off for me in terms of like my swimming, because I don't have any races lined up. I'm not doing it, but I want to swim without that pressure. Yeah. So now I'm going to there are places I like to swim open water that like I feel happy. So I'm just doing that.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, start there.
Yeah.
Always start with what you feel comfortable with.
But
And there's another good life lesson, right?
yeah.
Start with what you feel comfortable with, and focus on the good, and just keep.
Yeah, but it does make me very frustrated that I'm chicken shit in the ocean. It pisses me off.
We can fix that out. We can
it's
fix
mental.
it.
It's 100% mental, because
Yep.
I can tell you right now, I can go swim 3,000 in the pool, no problem.
Yep.
I'm strong. I'm just a chicken in my mind. Everybody knows it about me, so there's no hiding it. But
yeah, that's you just focus on, you stop saying you're chicken.
I stop the negative self-talk.
Yeah.
So it helps me justify. Right. It's
Step
all.
one.
Yep. I know.
Yeah. Also, even when people say, usually don't do this. Well, if you say don't do that, you're still saying, you say, oh, don't lift your head. You're still hearing lift your head, as opposed to saying put your head down.
Yeah.
Right. There's a difference between put your head down and don't lift your head.
Yeah.
So that's second grade teaching coming in
handy. No,
right. So a big difference. If you focus on what you want to do, it's like, oh, put your head down. That's your brain hears put your head down, as opposed to don't lift your head. What does your brain hear? Lift your head.
Yeah, your brain is very interesting. The brains are very interesting how they work. It's so awesome, Adina, connecting with you today on the podcast. I'm so excited for all the things that you're doing, and I hope we see each other soon.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's always great to catch up with you. And I'm sure we'll bump into each other somewhere.
Awesome.